The massive space station called Council Prime floated in the empty space between stars. Inside its crystal walls, representatives from 847 different species gathered in the great chamber. The room was so large that some beings needed flying platforms just to see the center stage. Today, like every day for the past 300 years, they were here to make decisions that affected trillions of lives across the galaxy. Ambassador Han Wu sat in the human section, his dark suit simple compared to the bright robes and strange armor worn by other species. He had been Earth's voice in this place for 12 years. His black hair was starting to show gray at the sides, and his face carried the weight of countless diplomatic battles. Next to him sat Dr. Park Tae, a woman with kind eyes who studied alien cultures, and Captain Lee Jin, whose military uniform was the only sign that humans took security seriously. The day started like any other. Species argued about trade routes. Someone complained about mining rights. The fish-like Aquarians wanted new water worlds, while the rock-eating lithoids demanded access to asteroid fields. Han Wu listened patiently, taking notes on his tablet. This was normal. This was how the galaxy worked. Then Chairman Veltar announced the next case. The Zephyrian Empire had filed a formal complaint against humanity. Han Wu felt his stomach drop. The Zephyrians were trouble. They looked like humans but taller, with silver skin and cold yellow eyes. Their empire controlled 60 star systems and had been growing larger every year. They were also bullies who took what they wanted and found. Excuses later. Ambassador Kextar of the Zephyrian Empire stepped forward. He was nearly 7 feet tall and wore armor that seemed to absorb light. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber without any need for amplification. "Honored Council," Kextar began, "humanity has violated the Sacred Borders Treaty. Their colonies on Kepler 442b, Ross 128b, and Proxima Centauri C were established in Zephyrian territorial space. These worlds must be surrendered immediately as compensation for this grave insult." Han Wu stood up slowly. "That's completely false. Those colonies were established 200 years ago, long before any Zephyrian claims to those regions. We have full documentation." "Silence!" Kextar's voice boomed. "The evidence is clear. These worlds belong to the Zephyrian sphere of influence." Dr. Park Tae whispered urgently to Han Wu, showing him data on her tablet. The numbers didn't make sense. The Zephyrian evidence showed star charts that had been clearly altered. Dates had been changed. Colonial records had been falsified. It was such obvious fraud that any first-year law student could spot it. But as Han Wu looked around the chamber, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Many of the alien representatives weren't looking at the evidence. They were looking at each other with knowing glances. This wasn't about truth. This was about politics. Chairman Veltar called for testimony. One by one, species representatives stood to speak. The Krillians supported the Zephyrian claim. So did the Vorthan Collective. The silicon-based Christarchs also agreed that humanity should give up the colonies. Han Wu realized what was happening. The Zephyrians had made deals, promises of trade, routes, threats of military action, bribes of rare minerals. The fix was in. Dr. Park Tae presented humanity's defense. She showed 300 years of colonial records. She displayed survey data proving humans had discovered the world's first. She presented testimony from 12 other species who had traded with human colonies for decades. Her evidence was perfect, complete, and absolutely convincing. It didn't matter. When Chairman Veltar called for the vote, Han Wu already knew the result. All those in favor of upholding the Zephyrian claim? Lights began appearing across the chamber. Red lights meant yes. Blue lights meant no. Green lights meant abstaining. The count was brutal. 423 red lights. 89. Blue lights. The rest abstained. The motion passes, Chairman Veltar announced. Humanity must surrender the disputed colonies within 60 standard days. The chamber filled with the sounds of different species celebrating or arguing. Han Wu sat in stunned silence for a moment. 3 human colonies. 2 million human citizens. Decades of terraforming work. All given away based on lies that everyone knew were lies. He thought about his daughter Nari, who commanded a ship in Earth's deep space fleet. He thought about the families on those colonies who had spent generations building new homes. He thought about every time he had defended the council system, telling people back on Earth that it was fair, that it worked, that humanity could trust it. Dr. Park Tae put her hand on his shoulder. "We can appeal. We can—" "No," Han Wu said, quietly. He stood up and walked toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Chairman Veltar looked surprised. "Ambassador Han Wu, the vote is concluded. You may file an appeal within—" "No appeal," Han Wu said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "No more arguments. No more evidence. No more pretending this is about justice." He turned slowly, looking at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. Some looked curious. Others looked guilty. A few looked angry that he was still talking. "For 300 years, Han Wu continued, humanity has believed in this council. We shared our technology freely. We helped solve conflicts. We opened our worlds to trade and friendship. We believed that different species could work together based on truth and fairness." His voice grew stronger. "Today, you have shown us that we were wrong. This council doesn't care about truth. It cares about power. It rewards the strong who threaten and bribe, and punishes the honest who trust in justice." Murmurs started spreading through the chamber. Some aliens were translating for others. The meaning was becoming clear. "Therefore," Han Wu said, "humanity withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The chamber exploded into chaos. Aliens were shouting in dozens of languages. Chairman Veltar was hammering his gavel for order. Ambassador Kextar was demanding to know what this meant. Han Wu turned to Dr. Park Tae and Captain Li Jin. "Gather our people. We're leaving." As the 3 humans walked toward the exit, every other human representative in the chamber stood up and followed them. Scientists, traders, cultural attachés, security officers. All 27 humans assigned to Council Prime walked out together. Behind them, the great chamber descended into complete disorder. No species had ever voluntarily left the Council before. No one knew what it meant or what would happen next. But Han Wu knew exactly what it meant. Humanity was done pretending that the galaxy was fair. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within hours, every major news network was broadcasting the same impossible story. Humanity had left the Galactic Council. For the first time in 3 centuries, a species had voluntarily walked away from galactic civilization. On Earth, President Yang Su called an emergency meeting. The Oval Office was packed with advisors, military commanders, and department heads. Admiral Kim Nari had rushed back from the Outer Rim, still wearing her space uniform. Minister Choi Su, the head of Foreign Affairs, looked like he hadn't slept in days. "What's our status?" President Yang Su asked. "All human embassies are beginning shutdown procedures," Minister Choi Su reported. Ambassador Han Wu's message was clear. We're pulling everyone out. Admiral Kim Nari stepped forward. Madam President, I have ships moving to every human diplomatic post in Council space. We'll have our people home within 72 hours. And our colonies? The President asked. Protected, Admiral Kim Nari said firmly. The Zephyrians want to take our worlds. They can try, but they'll find those colonies much harder to reach than they think. President Yang Su nodded. She had been expecting this day for years. Not the exact situation, but something like it. Humanity had grown too successful, too influential. Other species had started to see them as a threat rather than an ally. Begin the isolation protocol, she ordered. Across the galaxy, human ships appeared at diplomatic posts like ghosts. The vessels were sleek and quiet, painted in dark colors that seemed to absorb starlight. They docked at embassies, trade stations, and research facilities with military precision. Captain Li Jin commanded the evacuation of the Centauri Trade Hub, one of the busiest commercial stations in Council space. The station was a massive ring of metal and crystal that housed representatives from 40 different species. Human merchants had operated there for over a century. As human traders packed their belongings, alien customers gathered around them desperately. A Rigelian merchant named Vexapol grabbed Captain Li Jin's arm with 3 of his tentacles. Please, Vexapol begged. We need the quantum processors. My entire business depends on human technology. Surely we can work something out. Captain Li Jin gently removed the tentacles from his arm. All contracts were made with Council member species. Since humanity is no longer a Council member, those contracts are void. But we can make new contracts, Vexapol insisted. Private deals, species to species. I'm sorry, Captain Li Jin said. My orders are clear. No deals with any species that voted to steal our colonies. Vexapol's skin changed from blue to purple, a sign of extreme distress among his people. I didn't vote for anything. I'm just a traitor. Your government did, Captain Li Jin replied. The Rigelian Republic voted yes, 423 to 89, remember? Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the medical station, New Hope, Dr. Park Tae supervised the shutdown of human research facilities. Alien doctors watched in horror as advanced medical scanners were powered down and packed away. Dr. Siltra, a brilliant Andromedian surgeon, approached Dr. Park Tae as she sealed the last container of neural mapping equipment. These machines have saved millions of lives, Dr. Ziltra said. Surely you won't take them all away. Dr. Park Tae looked sad but determined. We shared this technology freely for decades. We asked for nothing in return except friendship and fair treatment. Yesterday, your species voted to reward our friendship by supporting lies and theft. I voted against it, Dr. Ziltra protested. Many of us did. Not enough of you, Dr. Park Tae replied. I'm sorry, but trust isn't something you can rebuild with words. The real shock came when the aliens realized how much they had been depending on human technology. The hyperspace communication network that connected thousands of worlds used human-designed quantum relays. When those relays were shut down, entire star systems lost contact with each other. Engineer Yoon Hai worked from a secure facility on Earth, methodically disabling human technology across Council space. Her fingers moved across holographic controls, sending shutdown commands to devices that were light years away. Hyperspace beacon network offline, she reported to her supervisor. Agricultural processors on 47 worlds going dark. Medical scanner network disconnected. Defense grid auxiliary systems shutting down. The supervisor, Director Nam Gil, watched the galaxy map as red warning lights appeared across hundreds of systems. Any attempts to override our shutdowns? Several, Yunhai replied. But human tech has always had built-in security. They can't access anything without our codes. Director Nam Gil smiled grimly. 300 years of sharing technology freely. They probably forgot it was still ours. The effects were immediate and devastating. On the agricultural world of Demeter Prime, crop processing plants ground to a halt when their atmospheric processors stopped working. The Sylphian colonists, who lived there, could no longer purify their air or regulate temperature in their growing domes. The proud Andromedian battle fleet discovered that their targeting systems were 60% human technology. Without those components, their mighty warships couldn't hit targets accurately beyond close range. Even the Galactic Council's own headquarters faced problems. The translation systems that allowed hundreds of species to communicate relied on human linguistic algorithms. Emergency meetings became chaos, as beings could no longer understand each other properly. But the biggest shock came when the Zephyrians tried to claim their prize colonies. Admiral Ko Min commanded the human defense fleet that surrounded the three disputed worlds. His ships didn't look threatening. They were smaller than Zephyrian vessels, with smooth lines and minimal weapons visible on their hulls. When the Zephyrian war fleet arrived at Kepler 442b, Admiral Ko Min's ships simply waited. Ambassador Kextar himself led the Zephyrian fleet. His massive dreadnought, the Eternal Conquest, could destroy most human ships with a single shot. He opened communications with Admiral Ko Min. Human Admiral, Kextar's voice boomed. Across space, these worlds now belong to the Zephyrian Empire by order of the Galactic Council. Withdraw your forces immediately. Admiral Ko Min appeared on the communication screen. He was a calm man with graying hair and steady eyes. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Ambassador. Humanity no longer recognizes the authority of the Galactic Council. What does that mean? Kextar demanded. It means, Admiral Ko Min said simply, that we don't care what the Council decided. These are human worlds, protected by human fleets. If you want them, you'll have to take them by force. Kextar's yellow eyes blazed with anger. You cannot stand against the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Perhaps not, Admiral Ko Min agreed. But we're willing to find out. Are you? For long minutes, the two fleets faced each other in the darkness of space. Zephyrian ships outnumbered human vessels 3-1. Their weapons were larger, their armor thicker. But something made Kextar hesitate. Maybe it was the calm confidence in Admiral Ko Min's voice. Maybe it was the fact that humans had just walked away from galactic civilization without seeming to care about the consequences. Maybe it was the growing realization that humanity might be more dangerous than anyone had thought. The Zephyrian fleet withdrew. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. Humanity had faced down the Zephyrian Empire and won without firing a shot. The species that had seemed so cooperative and peaceful for 3 centuries had suddenly become something else entirely. On Council Prime, Chairman Veltar called emergency session after emergency session. Representatives shouted at each other in languages that the broken translation system could barely handle. The Krillians demanded action. The Vorthan Collective suggested negotiation. The Christarchs simply sat in silence, their crystalline forms reflecting the chamber's lights like mirrors. But no one knew what to do about a species that had simply decided to ignore them completely. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Some beings would rather walk away from everything than accept injustice. And when those beings controlled technology that everyone else depended on, walking away could bring civilizations to their knees. 6 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was falling apart. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, Farmer Belcour stood in his dying crop fields. The tall, green-skinned Sylphian had spent 30 years growing food for his sector. Now his atmospheric processors sat silent and dark. Without human technology to regulate the air mixture, his crops were withering. "The oxygen levels are wrong," he told his wife Silara. "The carbon dioxide balance is off. The whole ecosystem is breaking down." Silara looked at their 4 children playing in the yellowing grass. "How long can we last?" "Maybe 3 months," Belcour said quietly. "Then we'll have to evacuate." Similar conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds across Council space. The removal of human technology had created a cascade of failures that no one had anticipated. On the industrial world of Iron Prime, the lithoid workers who ate metal for sustenance watched their smelting plants shut down one by one. The human-designed fusion cores that powered their facilities required quantum stabilizers that only humans knew how to make. Commander Rokhtar of the Lithoid Mining Guild stood before a dead fusion reactor, his rock-like skin dull with worry. "We can build new cores," he told his engineers. "But without the human stabilizers, they'll explode within days." "What about contacting the humans directly?" asked Engineer Stelvin. "They won't answer our calls," Rokhtar replied. "We voted to support the Zephyrians, remember? The humans don't forget things like that." The crisis was worst in space itself. The hyperspace communication network had been the galaxy's nervous system for over 2 centuries. Without it, star systems that had been connected for generations were now isolated islands in the void. Captain Wan Jay of the human patrol ship New Busan monitored the edge of human space. His job was simple: keep alien ships out. Every day, more vessels appeared at the invisible border that humanity had drawn around their territory. Today's visitor was a Vorthan diplomatic ship. The Vorthans were insect-like beings with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in multiple dimensions. Their representative, Ambassador Kixvar, appeared on Wan Jay's communication screen. "Human Captain," Kixvar clicked through his translator. "The Vorthan Collective requests an audience with your government. We wish to discuss a separate peace treaty." Captain Wan Jay's response was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Ambassador. Humanity is not accepting diplomatic communications at this time. But our trade routes are collapsing." Kixvar's antennae twitched with distress. "Our colonies need human medical supplies. Surely we can reach some arrangement." "Your collective voted to support the theft of our colonies," Wan Jay replied. "The Vorthan Collective made its choice. Now you live with the consequences." That was politics. Many of us opposed the decision. "Not enough of you," Wan Jay said, echoing the words that humans had been saying for months. "Please turn your ship around and leave human space." The Vorthan ship slowly turned and disappeared into hyperspace, another unsuccessful attempt to restore contact with humanity. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council itself was in chaos. Chairman Veltar had called his 5th emergency session of the week. The great chamber that had once been a symbol of unity now looked like a battlefield. "The economic reports are catastrophic," announced Councillor Pextra of the Regelian Republic. Her tentacles writhed with anxiety as she read from her data pad. "Our trade volume has dropped by 70%. 12 of our core worlds are facing infrastructure collapse." The Aquarian Federation is experiencing similar problems, added Counselor Tulvas, his gills fluttering rapidly. Our underwater cities depend on human pressure regulators. Without them, our deep-sea colonies are uninhabitable. Ambassador Kextar of the Zephyrian Empire stood to speak. Even 6 months later, he showed no signs of regret. "This is all temporary," he declared. "We have the best scientists in the galaxy. We can replace human technology." "With what?" demanded Counselor Nexron of the Crystalline Hegemony. "Humans didn't just provide technology, they provided innovation. They solved problems we didn't even know we had." The truth was becoming clear to everyone. For 3 centuries, humans had been the galaxy's problem solvers. When the Aquarians needed to build cities underwater, humans had designed pressure systems. When the lithoids wanted to mine in zero gravity, humans had created magnetic anchors. When the Sylphians struggled with atmospheric chemistry, humans had built processors that could balance gases with perfect precision, and they had shared all of it freely, asking for nothing but friendship in return. Dr. Yentar, the Council's chief scientist, delivered a report that silenced the chamber. The elderly Andromedian's voice shook as he read the numbers. "According to our analysis," he said, "human technology is integrated into 93% of galactic infrastructure. Medical systems, transportation networks, communication arrays, agricultural processors, mining equipment, even our defense systems. Removing human contributions would set galactic civilization back by approximately 200 years. The chamber fell silent. Even Ambassador Kextar looked troubled by these numbers. "How is that possible?" Chairman Veltar asked. "Humans are just one species among hundreds." Dr. Yentar adjusted his reading glasses. "Because they never hoarded. They're innovations. When a human scientist made a breakthrough, they shared it immediately with anyone who asked. They built on each other's work, and they built on ours. Over time, human methods became the standard because they simply worked better than alternatives. And now they're gone," Counselor Pextra said quietly. "The real panic began when long-range sensors detected something impossible. Human colonies that were supposed to be defenseless were expanding. New construction, new ships, new technology that sensors couldn't properly identify. Captain Bak Su had been a trader for 40 years. He had visited human worlds many times before. The crisis, and he thought he knew what human technology looked like. But when his ship approached the edges of human space to attempt another diplomatic contact, what he saw made no sense. The human defensive platforms around Proxima Centauri C were completely different from anything he had seen before. They were smaller, sleeker, and seemed to bend light around themselves. His ship's sensors could barely detect them. "How did they build new technology so quickly?" his navigator asked. Captain Bak Su studied the readings on his screens. "Maybe they didn't build it. Maybe they just stopped sharing the good stuff." That thought sent chills through the galactic intelligence community. If humans had been holding back their best technology while sharing only basic innovations, what else were they capable of? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Park Tae's research notes had been left behind when humans evacuated their facilities. Alien scientists had been studying them desperately, trying to understand human methods. Hidden in those notes was a comment that made everyone's blood run cold. Humans have always been conservative about sharing military technology. Cultural. Conditioning from our violent past. We share medical and agricultural advances freely, but weapons research remains classified. Perhaps this caution will serve us well if galactic politics ever turn hostile. The note was dated 50 years ago. For 50 years, humans had been preparing for the possibility that their friendship would be betrayed. They had shared technology that made life better across the galaxy, but they had kept their most advanced military research secret. Now, as alien civilizations crumbled without human support, humanity sat behind defensive barriers that no one could penetrate, using technology that no one had ever seen. The Zephyrian Empire, which had started this crisis, by demanding human colonies, made one more attempt to claim their prize. A massive fleet of 200 ships approached Kepler 442b, determined to take the world by force. They found the planet surrounded by defensive platforms that their sensors could barely detect. When the Zephyrian ships opened fire, their weapons seemed to pass through empty space. The human defenses were there, but they weren't where sensors said they should be. The return fire was precise and devastating. Not enough to destroy the Zephyrian fleet, but enough to disable every ship without killing a single crew member. The message was clear. Humans could have destroyed them easily, but chose mercy instead. The Zephyrian fleet limped home, and Ambassador Kextar finally understood what his empire had awakened. Humanity wasn't just technologically advanced. They were so far ahead that they could afford to be merciful to their enemies. In the council chambers, the debates had stopped. Representatives sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the true scope of their mistake. They had trusted that humanity would always be there to solve their problems. They had taken human friendship for granted. And when politics demanded a choice between justice and convenience, they had chosen convenience. Now, they were learning what the galaxy looked like without human help. It was a darker, colder place than anyone had imagined. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the truth finally came to light. Counselor Ixac of the Zephyrian Reformist Party had been investigating the colonial claims for months. Unlike his empire's leadership, Ixac believed, in truth, over conquest. He was a younger Zephyrian with silver skin that hadn't yet dulled with age, and his yellow eyes held an intensity that made others uncomfortable. What he discovered in the classified files made him sick. The evidence against humanity had been completely fabricated. Star charts had been altered using sophisticated computer programs. Colonial survey dates had been changed. Even the ancient Zephyrian territorial claims were recently created documents designed to look old. But the conspiracy went deeper than simple fraud. 3 other species had helped create the false evidence in exchange for shares of the human colonies. The Krillian Dominion wanted the mining rights to Kepler 442b. The Vorthan Collective sought the agricultural facilities on Ross 128b. The Christarch Union desired the research stations on Proxima Centauri C. They had planned to divide the human colonies among themselves, using the Galactic Council as their weapon. Ixac confronted his own government first. In the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime, he stood before Emperor Kexaron, Ambassador Kextar's brother and ruler of the Empire. "Your Majesty," Ixac said, his voice trembling with anger, "I have proof that our colonial claims against humanity were fraudulent. We have committed an act of galactic piracy." Emperor Kexaron lounged on his crystal throne unconcerned. "Fraud is such an ugly word, Counselor. I prefer to think of it as creative diplomacy." "The humans trusted the council system," Ixac continued. "They believed that truth and evidence mattered. We betrayed that trust for personal gain. And now we're paying the price," the Emperor admitted. "Our trade networks are collapsing. Our technology is failing. Perhaps we should have been more careful." "We should confess," Ixac said firmly. "Admit our crimes publicly. Apologize to humanity and try to rebuild the relationship we destroyed." Emperor Kexaron laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Confess? Apologize? We are the Zephyrian Empire. We do not bow to humans. Then we will fall without them, Ixac said quietly. The Emperor's expression turned dangerous. You forget your place, Counselor. Perhaps you should spend some time in the palace dungeons to remember your loyalty. But Ixac was already walking toward the door. My loyalty is to truth, Your Majesty, and the truth will come out whether you like it or not. 3 days later, Ixac stood before the Galactic Council with evidence that would shake the galaxy. The great chamber was packed as he presented document after document proving the conspiracy. The star charts were altered using Krillian quantum. Computers, he announced, displaying the evidence on the chamber's massive screens. The colonial dates were changed with Vorthan temporal manipulation technology. The territorial claims were created using Christarch historical fabrication methods. Gasps echoed through the chamber as representatives realized the scope of the deception. Chairman Veltar looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. This means, Ixac continued, that the Galactic Council voted to steal colonies from an innocent species based on completely false evidence. We have committed the greatest injustice in Council history. Ambassador Kexatar stormed to his feet. These are lies, reformist propaganda. Are they? Ixac pulled out a data crystal. This contains recorded conversations between Zephyrian, Krillian, Vorthan, and Christarch officials planning the entire conspiracy. Would you like me to play them for the Council? The chamber fell silent. Even Ambassador Kextar seemed to deflate. As he realized his crimes were about to be exposed, the recordings were damning. Species leaders discussing how to divide human colonies, officials laughing about fooling the Council, commanders planning military action against human civilians. When the last recording finished, the great chamber was completely quiet. Hundreds of species representatives sat in stunned silence, finally understanding what they had done. But the revelation came too late. Humanity had been silent for a year. No communications, no trade, no diplomatic contact of any kind. Every attempt to reach human space was politely but firmly turned away. Director Shin Bo of Human Intelligence had been monitoring galactic communications from a secret facility on Earth. His job was to watch and listen, gathering information about the species that had betrayed humanity's trust. The intelligence he gathered painted a picture of a galaxy in decline. Trade networks collapsing, medical systems failing, agricultural worlds struggling to feed their populations, transportation breaking down as human-maintained hyperspace beacons went dark. 17 species are facing economic collapse, he reported, to President Yang Su. 43 others are experiencing significant infrastructure failures. The Galactic Council meets in emergency session almost daily now. President Yang Su reviewed the reports in her office. Outside the windows, Earth cities gleamed with new construction. Humanity had used their year of isolation to rebuild and advance their technology even further. Any attempts to contact us directly? She asked. Hundreds, Director Shin Bo replied. Trade delegations, diplomatic envoys, scientific exchange requests, even some military surrenders from species seeking human protection. And our response? The same as always. We politely refuse contact and ask them to respect our sovereignty. President Yang Su nodded. The policy was clear. Humanity would not reward bad behavior with renewed friendship. Trust, once broken, could not be easily repaired, but private communications within human space told a different story. Admiral Kim. Nari sent regular reports from the fleet protecting human colonies. The worlds that the Zephyrians had tried to steal were thriving. New cities, new industries, new technologies that made the old human innovations look primitive. The colonies are stronger than ever, Admiral Kim Nari reported. Our defensive capabilities have improved by at least 300%, and morale is high. People understand why we left the Council. Captain Wan Jie continued his patrols at the edge of human space, turning away desperate alien visitors every day. Some came seeking trade, others wanted medical help. A few brought gifts and apologies. His response was always the same. Humanity appreciates your interest, but we are not accepting visitors at this time. But even Wan Jie was starting to feel sorry for some of the aliens. Not the conspirators or their allies, but the ordinary beings whose governments had betrayed humanity's friendship. The farmers whose crops were failing. The doctors whose patients were dying without human medical technology. The children growing up on worlds where the air was becoming unbreathable. Some of these people had nothing to do with the conspiracy, he told his first officer, Lieutenant Park Min. That's true, Park Min agreed. But their governments did, and governments represent their people. If they wanted better representation, they should have chosen better leaders. It was a harsh truth, but it was still truth. Democracy meant responsibility. If species chose leaders who valued power over justice, they had to live with the consequences. The breaking point came when the Sylphian agricultural world of New Eden sent a desperate message. Their entire population was facing starvation as their crop systems failed. Children were starting to show signs of malnutrition. The message reached Dr. Park Tae, who had returned to Earth after the evacuation. She had spent decades working with Sylphian scientists, helping them develop sustainable farming techniques. Many of the aliens on New Eden were her personal friends. "Ma'am," the communication officer said, "we're receiving emergency medical requests from 47 worlds. The Sylphians are offering to formally apologize for their government's vote. They want to surrender sovereignty in exchange for humanitarian aid." Dr. Park Tae felt her heart breaking. These were good people, suffering for their leaders' mistakes, but she also remembered the vote count. 423 to 89. The vast majority of galactic civilization had chosen to steal human colonies based on obvious lies. "Send them a standard response," she said quietly. "Humanity is not accepting communications at this time." But that night, Dr. Park Tae couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her apartment on Earth, thinking about Sylphian children going hungry because their leaders had been too cowardly to stand up for truth. She wasn't the only human struggling with these feelings. Across human space, people were watching the galactic news networks. They saw the suffering. They saw the infrastructure failures. They saw civilizations that had flourished for centuries slowly falling apart. Some humans felt satisfaction. The galaxy was learning that actions had consequences. Species that had taken human friendship for granted were discovering what life was like without it. But others felt sadness. Humanity had always been helpers. They had always tried to make life better for everyone. Watching other species suffer went against their basic nature. The debate raged in human media and government halls. Should they maintain isolation until the galaxy learned its lesson? Should they help innocent people who were suffering for their leaders' crimes? Should they try to rebuild relationships with species that had proven they couldn't be trusted? President Yang Su faced the hardest decision of her presidency. The galaxy was begging for forgiveness, but forgiveness without consequences was meaningless. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. The galaxy had learned to function without human technology, but it was a much smaller, darker place than before. On Earth, President Yang Su stood at the window of her office, watching the sunrise over the rebuilt cities. Humanity had used their isolation well. New technologies, new industries, new ways of living that didn't depend on anyone else. Behind her, Minister Choi Su cleared his throat. "Madam President, we've received another formal request from the Reformed Galactic Council." President Yang Su turned from the window. The Reformed Council was what remained after the conspiracy was exposed. The Zephyrian Empire had collapsed into civil war. The Krillian Dominion faced revolution. The Vorthon Collective had split into 12 smaller nations. The Christarch Union had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely. "What are they offering this time?" she asked. "Complete reparations for the attempted theft of our colonies," Minister Choi Su read from his tablet. "Public punishment of all conspirators, guaranteed human autonomy in all future council decisions, and a formal apology signed by every remaining member species." It was more than humanity had ever expected. The galaxy was literally begging for forgiveness. "They're also asking for humanitarian aid," Minister Choi Su continued. "The agricultural crisis is getting worse. Without human atmospheric processors, 17 worlds are becoming uninhabitable." President Yang Su sat down at her desk. These were the moments that defined civilizations. How do you respond when your enemies are defeated and begging for mercy? How do you balance justice with compassion? "What do our people want?" she asked. "It's complicated," Minister Choi Su admitted. "The polls show that 60% want to maintain isolation until the galaxy proves it has really changed. 30% want to provide humanitarian aid immediately. 10% want to rejoin the council under the proposed terms." The president nodded. Democracy was messy, but it was honest. Unlike the fake democracy of the Galactic Council, where powerful species could manipulate votes through bribes and threats. A communication alert chimed on her desk. Admiral Kim Nari's face appeared on the screen, broadcasting from her flagship at the edge of human space. "Madam President," Admiral Kim Nari said, "we have visitors." The visitors were unlike anything anyone expected. A small fleet of ships representing 12 different species. Not government vessels, but private ships belonging to individuals who had opposed their government's votes 2 years ago. The fleet was led by Captain Rodan of the exploration vessel New Sol. His ship was one of humanity's newest designs, sleek and powerful beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. "This is interesting," Captain Rodan reported to Admiral Kim Nari. "They're not asking for official diplomatic contact. They're asking for permission to apologize personally." The alien fleet contained beings who had tried to stop the conspiracy. Counselor Iksak of the Zephyrian Reformists was there, along with Dr. Yelvana, an Andromedian scientist who had publicly opposed her government's vote. There was Trader Venkol, a Rigelian merchant who had lost his business rather than support the colonial theft. "What do they want?" Admiral Kim Nari asked. "To talk," Captain Rodan replied. "Not as representatives of their governments, but as individuals who believe their species made a terrible mistake." The conversation that followed would change galactic history. Dr. Yelvana, speaking for the group, appeared on the communication screen. Her insectoid features were marked with shame, but her voice was steady. "Admiral Kim Nari," she said, "we come not as diplomats, but as beings who failed to prevent a great injustice. We want you to know that not all of us supported what happened." "We know," Admiral Kim Nari replied. "We monitored the votes. We know who stood with us and who stood against us. Then you know that some of us are worthy of your friendship, Dr. Yelvana continued. We propose something that has never been tried before. Individual relationships, species-to-species contracts, not through the Council, but directly between peoples who prove themselves trustworthy. The idea was revolutionary. Instead of dealing with the Galactic Council as a whole, humanity could choose which species to trust based on their actions rather than their politics. Admiral Kim Nari consulted with Earth before responding. The debate in the President's cabinet was intense. It's risky, warned Defense Secretary Park Jong. How do we know which species we can trust? How do we prevent another conspiracy? We test them, suggested Dr. Nam Gil, the intelligence director. Small partnerships at first, trade deals, scientific exchanges. We see who honors their agreements and who doesn't. President Yang Su made the decision that would reshape galactic civilization. We try it, she said, but on our terms. The announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Humanity would not rejoin the Galactic Council. Instead, they would build a new network of relationships based on merit and mutual respect. The rules were simple. Any species that wanted to work with humanity had to prove themselves worthy through actions, not words. They had to demonstrate that they valued justice over politics. They had to show that they could be trusted to honor their agreements. Ambassador Kang Mi was chosen to lead this new kind of diplomacy. She was younger than Han Wu, but she had learned from his experience. She would not make the mistake of trusting institutions over individuals. Her first meeting took place on a neutral space station that humanity had built at the edge of their territory. It was small compared to Council Prime, but it was designed for honesty rather than intimidation. 12 species sent representatives to that first meeting, not government officials, but individuals who had stood against the conspiracy. Scientists who had refused to falsify data, traders who had lost business rather than support theft, military officers who had resigned rather than attack innocent colonies. We're not here to rebuild the old system, Ambassador Kang Mi told them. That system failed because it valued politics over truth. We're going to try something different. The new system was based on bilateral agreements. Each species that wanted to work with humanity had to negotiate separately. They had to prove their trustworthiness through actions. They had to accept that humanity would never again submit to collective judgment by species who might betray them. The first agreement was with the Aquarian Federation, represented by Commander Tulven, who had voted against the conspiracy and lost his position for it. The agreement was simple: technical assistance for underwater cities in exchange for rare minerals and mutual defense guarantees. The second agreement was with a reformed Rigelian Republic, now led by trader Venkol. The Rigelians offered to share their quantum computing advances in exchange for human medical technology. One by one, honest species began partnering with humanity, not as members of a council, but as friends who had earned trust through their actions. But the most important visitor came 6 months later, an old man in a simple transport ship traveling alone. It was former Chairman Veltar of the original Galactic Council. He met with Ambassador Kang Mi in a small conference room, not the grand chambers where diplomacy had once been conducted. "I wanted to apologize personally," Veltar said. His fish-like features were marked with age and regret. "I failed to protect justice in my own chamber. I allowed politics to corrupt the system we had built together." Ambassador Kang Mi studied the old alien carefully. "Why didn't you stand up to the conspiracy?" "Because I was a coward," Veltar admitted. I thought I could navigate between competing interests. I thought I could find a compromise that would satisfy everyone. I forgot that some things cannot be compromised. What would you do differently? Kang Mi asked. I would choose truth over politics, Veltar said simply. Every time. No matter the cost. The conversation lasted for hours. Veltar shared intelligence about remaining conspirators. He provided documentation of other species that had secretly opposed the theft, but lacked the courage to vote against it. He offered to testify at war crimes tribunals, but most importantly, he asked for nothing in return. I don't expect forgiveness, he said as he prepared to leave. I just wanted you to know that some of us understand what we lost when we betrayed your trust. 2 years later, the galaxy looked completely different. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Most species had left to form smaller alliances or to pursue individual relationships with humanity. Captain Rodan commanded regular exploration missions, carrying advanced human technology to worlds that had earned humanity's friendship. His ship represented a new era of galactic civilization, one based on merit rather than politics. The space station where Ambassador Kang Mi worked had grown into a small city. Representatives from 43 species maintained permanent offices there, not as members of a collective government, but as friends who had proven themselves worthy of trust. And on Earth, President Yang Su reflected on the lessons learned. Humanity had discovered that they didn't need the approval of hundreds of species to be successful. They didn't need to participate in political systems that valued power over truth. They could choose their own friends and build their own civilization, but they had also learned that isolation wasn't the answer. The galaxy was full of good beings who deserved friendship and support. The key was choosing those friends carefully